morning and welcome to the Middle Ground Book Fest. My name is Samantha Gettings and I will be the moderator today for the panel. And I'm a sixth grade language arts teacher in a middle school, and I'm really excited to be here today to chat with our authors. And today we'll be covering helping loved ones and how middle grade kids can be resourceful. So I'd like to start by introducing the authors on our panel. So let's start with Loriel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Loriel Ryon. I'm the author of the middle grade novel Into the Tall, Tall Grass. It is an upper middle grade novel that features a girl who goes on a magical journey through the desert to save her grandmother.
Excellent. Thank you. JL?
I do not have a copy of my book yet. It's not out until 2022. But I am JL, the author of Parker Magic Academy, A Taste of Magic, which is about 12-year-old Kiana, who's an inner city Black girl who discovers that she's a witch and uncovers this entire magical world in the back of her beauty shop, and then has to lean into her magical powers and to save her school because redistricting and gentrification are threatening to shut it down.
Wow, it's very exciting. I'm sure some of my students would love to read that. Clarabelle.
Hi, I'm Clarabelle Ortega. I'm the author of Ghost Squad, and Ghost Squad is a spooky book that's Coco meets Stranger Things about Lucely Luna, who accidentally conjures some evil ghosts with her best friend Sid and has to find a spell to put them back into the underworld before the full moon on Halloween, and it's based on Dominican folklore.
Oh, that sounds very interesting. Thank you. Reyna?
Hi, everyone. I'm Reyna Luz Alegre, author of middle grade novel The Dream Weaver, which is about a 12-year-old girl who goes to spend the summer and live with her grandpa, and she finds out that he's in some trouble, and she ends up trying to help him save her business, which is a beachside bowling alley, and it's contemporary and I think hope, fun, and heartfelt for the summer.
Oh, it sounds exciting. Thank you so much. Jessica, last but not least, Jessica.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessie Kim, and I'm the author of Stand Up Yumi Chung. And it's about an 11-year-old girl who's a little shy, and she dreams of being a stand-up comedian despite her immigrant parents' wishes.
Awesome. I don't think I've ever read a book about a comedian, so I'm looking forward to that one. All right. Well, I do have some questions prepared for our panel this morning. And I'll read the first question and we'll just go around and you'll hear from the authors their answers regarding the question. So my first question this morning is, what does it mean to have a resourceful character in your stories? And when you answer that question, can you discuss, why you want your character to struggle and overcome challenges? Because I know when I'm reading, sometimes I'm like, why are we doing this to our character? So if you could answer both parts of that, that would be awesome. So could we start with Jessica?
Sure. In middle grade, when you're 11 years old, it's really difficult sometimes because you're very limited by what you can do as far as if your parents say no, well, what can you really do? And so that's kind of the challenge that my character faces. Yumi really wants to be a stand-up comedian, but her parents are super against it, and they want her to study for this exam that she has coming up. And so I think it's really important for young readers to see that these characters are just like them. They have the same limitations. They have the same big dreams. They still have lots of things that they want to do, yet they have these challenges. And so it takes a lot of ingenuity and a lot of trying again for them to get what they really want ultimately. And sometimes what they need turns out to be a little different from what they want. So,
yeah, especially at that age, at 11, it's probably hard to see that other people actually do have a similar struggle. Thank you. Reyna.
Yes. Well, first, as a writer, I'd say that conflict is what sort of drives the story, for me at least, because I could love the characters so much, but if they're not doing anything, if they're just sitting there, talking about how great life is, then that might work for a few chapters. But I feel like as a reader, eventually I'll be like, okay, well, that was great, but I need a problem for them to solve. And also life is full of conflict, even unfortunately, like at every age, and especially in middle grade where kids are starting to first like spring off from their parents and really think more independently about maybe the things my parents told me all this time weren't quite right, or maybe I need to sort of go through my own journey to understand where they're coming from and why they said this. And so in the Dreamweaver, Zoe realizes that her dad, who she's always defended like very vigorously, he's not actually in the place where he can be the best parent to her right now. He hasn't really been the most responsible or stable since her mom died before the book, and now he sort of dumps her at her grandpa's house. Although she loves her grandpa very much, she's like, wait, what do you mean you're leaving without me? You're my dad. You're not supposed to leave indefinitely without me. So she sort of she just starts to realize that she needs to think for herself and start to trust her gut. And also, like, she loves everyone. Everyone in the book loves each other. They're just not going about it in the best way possible. So she starts to think of ways through trial and error that she can try to help the ones she loves and help herself too.
And so it sounds like relationships are really important in your book. And I think at that age, a lot of students or children are trying to figure out how to navigate those relationships. So that sounds like it would be a great story for our middle grade students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Clarabelle.
Yeah, so piggybacking off of what Reyna said a little bit in terms of the writing of it all, when you start a story and then when you end a story, you want your character to have gone through something or change in some way, and the best way to do that is like to put them through stuff. It's much like life. Like, we change and we grow because of the things that we go through, even if we're not seeing that in the moment. So for me, that was definitely a big part of Lucelia's journey, and her feeling what her family is, and who is part of her family and what makes a family, and that found family is valid, and it's something that she has to like go through a lot to learn. So yeah.
Awesome. And that it sounds like there's a little bit of character change in there, which I think is important too for our middle grade students to understand that change is also okay. Thank you. JL.
Yeah, so one of the things I was keeping in mind when I was writing Park Row was I used to teach middle school, and I found just with myself when I was that age and with my students that they have this huge desire to help. And a lot of times I think when they are 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, they can feel like they don't have the tools to help because they're so young, or because they have parents, or because they're not an adult, or they can't drive, and so they have all these limitations. And so I thought it was really cool to explore a story where a character could implement big change, could chase huge dreams, kind of like Jessica was saying, despite their age, despite not being an adult, to really inspire kids of that age to realize the impact that they can have, even when they're in middle school. And then in terms of like why put them through so much, I think it's important to have obviously a wide range of book options for kids, but I also think one of the things that I felt compelled to write was I taught a lot of students that were dealing with a lot of big issues, and so I just thought that it was important for them to explore these issues that are affecting their life in very big, real ways, and make sure that within that they feel empowered. So they're able to, at least in sort of a nuanced way, reframe things that they're dealing with in their real life and consider their own magical abilities to address them. So redistricting and gentrification are something very near and dear to my heart and very near and dear to the kids that I taught. And so there are kids all over the world dealing with that. It's a very real, impactful reality. And so I thought it would be cool to explore that in sort of a funny, but also like big change sort of way.
Yeah, that's excellent. I love that you have this type of fun story, but you're still showing that there can be change within that. So I think that'll make it really exciting for them as well. Thank you. And Loriel.
So for my book with Yolanda, my main character Yolanda, she is kind of an independent person and doesn't really want to ask for help from anyone. And so for her, being resourceful is part, her relying on herself, but also learning to rely on others and use her resources of her sister and her friends and her grandmother and all of those people around her, and kind of opening up to being okay with asking for help at times. At that age of like 12, you're kind of learning how to, kind of like what Jessica said, branch off a little bit from your family, but you're quite limited in what you're able to do. And so she's just trying to figure out how to still stay true to herself and her independence, but also learn how to like open up and let others in as well.
I like that you mentioned staying true to yourself. I think especially in the middle grades, children might find that a little difficult. So I think that'll be a great addition to their, classroom libraries to see that it's okay to remain yourself, but also make changes. But thank you for answering that question. I'm looking forward to reading all of those books just based on that question alone. But my second question today, how are the recent events, including the pandemic and racial protests, influencing your writing? So whether already written something before or writing something now, how are the current events influencing what you're writing? And we'll start with Jana.
I'm really trying to make my characters a little bit more aware of their privilege, and I think that that's something that everybody really needs to to be thinking about. And I've always tried to write like a diverse cast, and I just think it an important, in addition to just being so important, it's also more interesting to me. Like in the Dreamweaver, Zoe's reconnecting with her Cuban heritage because her mom passed away before the book started, and she feels like there's this whole part of herself that's missing that she starts to reconnect with, like when she moves in with her grandpa, her mom's dad, and her dad leaves. But also, I think I might be mispronouncing her name because I've only read her books, but Jasmine Guillory, am I pronouncing that right? She's an adult romance novelist, but she wrote a really amazing piece for, I think it was Time magazine, about how reading builds empathy. So she's so this is not middle grade, sorry, but she wrote the piece recently, and she's a romance novelist, and her protagonists, I believe, are all Black or women of color, and like the stories are amazing, and in them she also works in a lot of issues. Like I remember that I think she explicitly referenced Black Lives Matter in Party of Two. I don't remember. And I'm sorry, I'm going off topic with romance novels. I just read this and it left a deep impact because I thought her piece for Time and all of her books are brilliant. And like she just wrote about how like if you can read a character who has a different background than you, if you're white and you're reading a Black author, or if you're Latinx and reading a Black author, or it's important to just to put yourself into another person's shoes, and sometimes it's helpful to do that in fiction because, like we were talking about before, you read about the characters' challenges and you relate to them on a personal level, but then you also learn about how the challenges that they're facing are different than yours, and that you might have a privilege that the others don't, and it's just helpful, especially so on the kids level. We're talking about middle grade. There's many amazing Black middle grade authors. Like I just finished From the Desk of Zoe Washington by Janae Marks, which was amazing and really shone a light on the systemic racism in the criminal justice system. And you see, and the book is about what happens to her dad, who was incarcerated when she was, I think it was either when her mom was pregnant, when she was a baby, when the character was a baby, and now as I think she was 12-year-old girl, as a middle school girl, she's like, wait, maybe dad was innocent, and I don't want to give away the whole book, but it's a really great book that I think should just be required reading for everybody, that she now is on this journey to find her dad's innocence, and it's just a really great read.
Yeah,
So reading widely. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, I think it's important to get those perspectives, like you were saying, like you're gonna read a book and it gives you time to internalize it too and understand what the character might be going through and how that translates to our everyday lives. Thank you. Clarabelle, same question. How has the pandemic or the recent racial protests influenced your writing?
Sorry, my sound it keeps cutting out. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So for me, it's been very hard for me to write and to be creative during this time, in general, because my mind has been all over the place. I think it's, on the one hand, a lot of us are stuck indoors and it's like we have more time, but I don't think that equates to be more productive, nor should it, because we're all going through a lot. But I think in terms of my writing, I've been a lot more explicit in my explanations of things. During this pandemic, I was on deadline for a graphic novel that I'm working on called Frizzy, and it's about curly hair, right? And curly hair in the Dominican community, and why straightening our hair is such a big thing, why there's so many Dominican salons, all this stuff. And I realized when going back and reading the script that I never explicitly said, like, it's because of anti-Blackness. Like, the reason why we straighten our hair so much and we say having curly hair is not presentable or curly hair is not good hair, it stems from anti-Blackness. And I hadn't explicitly said that in the text. And I think that I realized, like, I have to say this. I can't, even just inferring it and dancing around it, for middle grade, I feel like I really wanted to talk about that, especially because it's been such a huge thing within the Latinx community, especially right now. A lot of people are coming to terms with a lot of those issues that they hadn't really thought about before. So for me, it was just sort of speaking more plainly about things and not being afraid to scare people or parents or kids away from a specific topic by talking about something that is a bit uncomfortable for some people. And I just wanted to make sure that I was very clear about it and very honest about it. I think honesty is a huge thing that we really need to incorporate in our books for kids. Kids need that. Kids need to see the truth of the things that we're going through, and they can take it. They're so smart and they're so much more understanding and resilient than I think a lot of people give them credit for. So for me, it was just, I think I've never really shied away from talking about things, but I think that I wanted to be more explicit in how I explained them in my book. And I think for me, the pandemic and the protests have really pushed that, that for me, just being completely honest about the topics that I'm talking about and not sugarcoating anything.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually brings me to, I had a two-part to this question, but one thing when you guys are answering, you could think about, how do you see teachers or students looking at your books and talking about the tough topics like racial protests, like all of the different views going on with the pandemic? And as as we're answering, think about how can we use these readings or your writing to teach students and have those tough conversations? And Clarabelle, you really covered that in your response. So I think, Loriel, would you like to, build on that? And if anyone wants to jump in after, certainly do so. Oh, Loriel, I think you're on mute still.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So for the first part of the question about like how has the pandemic and protests affected your writing? Well, yeah, I'm home a lot. with my kids a lot. It's, even though we have all the time in the world, I have no time to do anything. So the very first few months were really, really hard, and just getting a new rhythm and trying to figure out how to not like harm my children in terms of like, this is what we're doing all day and we're not doing anything. But now we've kind of, hit a rhythm, and they're kind of more comfortable in this big change, and we're getting there. So yeah, I mean, it's been hard. I'm also a nurse, so working part-time, like I'm not like in like the COVID stuff, but still I'm like, in the clinic doing work. And so that's a little stressful as well, being out as like an essential worker. My husband's also an essential worker. He's a physical therapist. So he's in 30 armpits a day, doing with patient care. So that's a little stressful as well. But I think in terms of, the other side, kind of what Clarabelle was actually talking about, is just like a lot of these topics have, with the racial protests and the pandemic, have brought up a lot of things that I think we really didn't talk about very much, in terms of, I don't know if they were taboo or just quiet, or people weren't really, the people were talking about it, but it wasn't as loud as it is right now. And sort of, you can't look away from it, right? There's so much going on. And so I'm finding that my writing is more focusing, almost like exactly what Clarabelle said, just instead of like being understated about it, it's like coming out and saying it a little bit more loudly. And, being an author of middle grade, a lot of times you do have to kind of dance around a topic, or you used to, right? You used to have to kind of very sensitively deal with stuff, and you still do. But because these kids now are seeing the reality of what's going on in terms of the pandemic and the protests, and things are being really shown to them very obviously, we have to be able to address that as well. Even if their parents, teachers, or librarians are a little more uncomfortable with those topics, the kids are still being exposed to them. And so I think it's really important to kind of address it head on, because the kids are ready. Like, my kids are saying stuff that I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that you think about things like that. Like, I just figured that out. I can't believe you're already 6 years old. Like, you understand this stuff. So I think, we have to give people more, kids and teachers, kids especially need more credit. They're ready. They can understand this. And it's up to us to kind of just say it,
Exactly. I think kids know a lot more than we give them credit for often, and they're ready to have those conversations pretty much most of the time, it seems. And I just want to jump to Jessica, because I know your book is dealing with maybe the cultural aspect of having those tough conversations and wanting to do something that maybe your parents don't necessarily approve of. And I'm sure even students today might be feeling that as well. So do you mind answering the question? You could do part one or part two or both, but whatever, you think.
Regarding the pandemic.
Yeah, so
and the
pandemic
protests?
or protest, but then also like how to have these tough conversations, and beyond the pandemic and protests as well.
Okay, so for me, I also have 2 young children, and so the pandemic has been really difficult as far as me being able to find time to write. And I think for a long time I was really trying to do both, but I got to a point where I kind of had to say, I can't. So I'm actually on hiatus right now. I'm not writing, and that was really difficult to do. I think as writers, sometimes we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and we feel guilty when we're not writing, and we see everyone else is writing, and you feel like if I was stronger or whatever, I should be able to do this. But ultimately, I kind of got to the point where I was like, cooking and educating and problem solving and being, the lifeguard of the cop and the chef and the chauffeur, and trying to write late at night. And it wasn't great for my mental health. And so I think the world changed, everything changed in the last several months, not just with the pandemic, but what's going on, the conversations that we're having, what's on the news. And I felt at the time I was writing a really sweet story that meant a lot to me. It was about friendship and best friends breaking up. But as I sat down at the laptop to write, it felt so insignificant compared to what's going on in our world. And it felt silly. And it just didn't feel like you know, something that I could authentically access at this point in my life. And so I'm putting that manuscript kind of on hold, and I'm kind of rethinking because there's so much on my mind. There's so many really important things that are going on right now. And I think we have such a great, amazing platform where we could tell stories and make sense of what's going on and be able to kind of tap into all these feelings that kids are feeling right now. And I almost feel like I need to clean my slate and kind of refocus and kind of you know, let stories sit for a minute to make room for other ones. And right now is such a fertile ground. We have maybe too many thoughts, really, as I kind of have to sort through and figure out. I am spending a lot of time reading right now, and I just finished American as Paneer Pie by Supriya Kelkar, and she does a really great job talking about, and her book is about an Indian American immigrant and some of the hate crimes and small town politics that are affecting her as a middle grade. And I really love the way she dealt with being an ally and knowing when it's your turn to speak and making room for other people and protecting people's space. And it was done in such a beautiful way that really made sense to a young reader. And I really love that. And so I'm kind of rethinking how I'm going to restructure my next story so I can tell some of these stories and also to name it, you know, like we're saying, calling something anti-racist, using the terms ally. And I think, you know, that's not above kids' heads at all, like Loriel was saying. Like, I think, you know, just having a common language so that we could discuss these things with our teachers, with our librarians, with our peers, with our parents, and being able to see the news and be able to make sense of what's going on in an empathetic way, in a way that we can access through story and feelings and things that we all can feel as human beings, I think is so powerful. And so I kind of want to reshuffle, and figure out what the story is inside of me right now.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. JL, so I know you kind of cut out a little bit, but the question was, you know, how has the pandemic or the recent racial protests influenced your writing, as well as how can we use your writing to have the tough conversations with, you know, other teachers, other kids, parents, librarians, you know, people who are accessing your books? How can we use those writings to have those tough conversations?
Can you hear me okay? Because my connection is a little fuzzy. Am I coming through clear?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can hear you clearly.
I actually love this question. And I love this question mainly because I think my answer, I'm super excited about all the things you guys are writing in this space and in this time, and just the things that you're thinking about and we'll write later. Because I just think it's going to be just a very, you know, a very, very robust and impactful stream of books coming down the line that's influenced by this. It's really going to like raise up this younger generation. But in my middle grade book in particular, Park Row Magic Academy, and I was thinking about the audience that the Black kid who's going to pick up my book. You know, my little sisters are middle grade age, and I think about the book that I wanted when I was that age, and I think about the world right now. I actually, I was drafting. Let's see, the latest draft I was doing was right when we'd gone to the first round of quarantine, like nationwide. And so I actually wove in, because there's a lot of humor in my book. And when I think about my sisters and when I think about little me and I think about the kids picking up my book in the future, like it's really important for me to make them laugh. I want them to experience like laugh out loud joy when they read my book. I want my middle grade book to be this place where we see, you know, kids of all races and ethnicities, but in particular, a Black main character, a Black protagonist, just full of joy and full of so much magic and power. So my approach was a little different. Specifically the pandemic, I worked in my world building and my magic. So out of the pandemic, they refer to the pandemic in the past, like it's happened in their history, because it is contemporary fantasy. It's not second world. And so they refer to the pandemic, and then there are like remnants of the pandemic that have like influenced different types of things, that like the way the world functions and the way magic functions in the world. And I've tried to infuse some of that with some humor and lots of joy. And I don't want to give away too much because it's woven pretty intricately into the plot, but I've tried to come up with some clever ways to have people look back on this part in our history and reimagine, like, what would we do if we had magic, you know, when we came through that time, and what would be the trickle down effect of that, you know, years and years later. So that was my approach with the pandemic. It's very much you know, there's sprinkles of it in there for sure, and it's very evident in the world building and some of the ways some of the ways that you see magic operate in the world. And then off topic, in my YA book, my books are very much about allyship and privilege and very on the nose about racism. And so, but in my middle grade, at least thus far with this idea, I haven't gotten into that aspect of it. I was focused very much on Black joy in my middle grade piece. But the pandemic did work its way in there, because I'm assuming it's going to be something that kids are very aware of, that they don't forget, and I know it'll be in the back of their heads.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Jill. And just thinking back to what you said earlier, I think it's really important to have characters that our kids can relate to. And I know I've definitely felt that a few times reading some of the books I've picked up in the last couple of weeks. Even just, it's nice to see someone that you can relate to, and it just helps bring everything that's going around, you know, in the world right now, kind of brings it full circle, and I'm sure for some kids too. So thank you for everyone for your responses. So the next question that I have is definitely influenced by the teacher in me, because one thing that we always talk about in class is the theme of the story. And a lot of teachers are going to be asking students, you know, what do you think the theme is of the story? What is the message that the author is trying to send to us through their writing? And often we're encouraging students to determine that on their own. We're not giving them the lesson, and they're finding parts of the story that really support that, and it's all of their interpretation. But there's really never a chance for them to ask the author, you know, what is that message that you're trying to get out? So my question for you today would be, you know, what is it that you would want students, kids, parents, teachers to take away from your story? And Clarabelle, could we start with you?
Sure. So Ghost Squad was inspired by, like I said before, Dominican folklore, but it was also inspired by my brother passing away from cancer in 2011. So the folklore that I've been mentioning has to do with fireflies. So in DR, we say that fireflies are the souls of our lost loved ones who are watching over us, right? So in Ghost Squad, Lucely lives in this house, and she is surrounded by these fireflies. Also, are her ancestors. They switch back and forth, like between the fireflies and the ghosts. So I would say if readers could take one thing away from the book, I would want it to be a sense of comfort if they are feeling grief, and if they haven't experienced loss, I hope that it can be something that they turn to when that moment comes. You know, there's a lot of grief and loss happening just like in the news also, and I feel like giving kids a sense of comfort when it comes to things that are really horrible is so super important, so that they can take something good or positive, or even learn how to deal with these like really terrible topics in a way that's accessible to them. And it also goes back to the theme of, like, you know, found family. In my book, I feel like those are the two really big themes, just learning to deal with grief, loss, and also found family. Her family is made up of her friends and her dad and ghosts. So it's not something that's, you know, a traditional found family, but like for our culture, our ancestors are past, our loved ones who have passed on are still very much a part of our lives, and I wanted to incorporate that and to give kids sort of that to hold on to, because dealing with grief as an adult is so hard. So when you think about it from a kid's perspective, when they haven't fully gotten to experience a lot of the same things that we have, I feel like it's a really, really hard thing for them to deal with. And I hope Ghost Squad both helps to show them that the people that we have lost are always with us, but also helps them to be able to navigate that grief in a way that as weird as it is, can have some joy in it as well, because death is part of life, and that's a hard thing to talk about and to feel, but they're being confronted with it every day, whether we like it or not. And I think it's important to explain it to them in that way, and to let them see that it's natural and that it's okay.
Absolutely. That was very beautiful. And I think there are many lessons that kids can take away from that, especially the one that you highlighted the most, but that's wonderful. Thank you. Reyna, same question.
Can you hear me? Sorry, I had to unmute. Thanks, sorry. So I think my book has a few different themes. Probably the one that jumps out at me, or that I really tried to convey, was that if a kid ever feels like they're all alone, which is how Zoe feels in the book, where like she's not physically alone. She still has her family members, but she's at this crossroads where the big brother that she's relied on for so much is planning to head off to college soon, and her dad has actually physically left, and her grandpa is trying to take care of things, but she can clearly see that he's just not on top of everything. Then follow your gut. Like really, really listen to that little voice inside of you that says, that knows if something's right or wrong. And and hopefully you have someone to trust and that you can talk to, even if you, even if there are challenges there or communication issues there. If you do have someone who that you can trust, like she does love and trust her family, she just knows that they're just not they're not on a good path. So her dad and her grandpa, then talk to them and don't give up, and she keeps fighting for, even though she's only 12, and even though she can't drive, and even though she doesn't have a bank account, even though she doesn't know exactly what the right answer is. How is she going to save her grandpa's bowling alley? How is she going to get her dad home? But just stand up for yourself and lovingly try to initiate those conversations, even if the communication's coming from the 12-year-old and not from the parent or from the loved one, the adult grandparent. You like we were all talking about, like everyone else said so well, kids are really smart, and they really are capable of understanding a lot, and of being mature, and I think even handling things sometimes in a better way than grown-ups. Obviously not encouraging them to do anything dangerous or anything like that, but they can understand things, and they have a more innocent take, a more fresh take. And so she doesn't give up. So that's another theme, I guess, is don't give up. Listen to your gut and don't give up. But go about it, and hopefully well thought out, which she doesn't, of course, she's 12. She doesn't always think everything out perfectly, but try to think things out, and to communicate with the people you can trust, and lovingly express why what they're doing is hurting you. And and also be accountable for yourself. If you've hurt someone in some way, then just try to make it better.
Yeah,
always try to make it better.
That's a great message for middle grade kids. I think they probably experience that quite a bit throughout their day, just to say the least. Loriel.
All right. So I guess in thinking about the theme of my book, I tried to think about, why did I write it in the first place? And one of the things that I was thinking about when I was writing this was what were some of my biggest fears around this age? And I think one of my biggest fears was losing my grandparents. That was a really hard realization to understand, that they weren't going to be around forever. And I had never really experienced loss like that, loss of a loved one before. And so trying to figure out what book would have comforted me when I was going through those, waking up in the middle of the night and thinking about it, right? So for me, that, trying to make, because even my own family, we didn't really want to talk about death. Nobody wanted to talk about it with me, and I was kind of really wanting somebody to talk to me about it. So for my book, showing grief and loss, and as even piggybacking off of what Clarabelle even said, as a beautiful part of life, even though it is hard and scary and sometimes tragic, there is there can be this healing beauty of it as well. And so that's kind of what I wanted to show with this book. Yeah. And then like the secondary, another theme specifically related to my main character, Yolanda, is she's a little cranky, she's a little grouchy, she's very like independent, she doesn't want help. She has her viewpoints of the world that she doesn't really want changed. And so what she goes through, like through the story and by the end, is realizing that she does have the capacity to change. Just because she's always thought of herself a certain way, or because other people think of her a certain way, doesn't mean that she always has to be that way. And so for like, especially for middle grade readers, I just really wanted them to see that, you know, even if you always, you know, are this person or you're that person, or people categorize you this or that way, you don't always have to be that way. You can always have the capacity to change and grow, to better yourself, and to be more, you know, understanding of other people in your life. So I guess those are the two main themes.
Oh, great. Thank you very much for sharing. As you know, as we're beginning to wind down, I still want Jessica and JL to answer the same question, and then I have one more question for you to wrap up before we say goodbye. So, Jessica, could you just share, you know, what you would hope students are taking away from your book?
Yeah, definitely. I really wanted my young readers, or all my readers, to come away with the feeling that they're enough. So in the beginning, Yumi feels really trapped. She doesn't quite understand her parents, but she doesn't totally fit in, you know, with the kids at school either. And she kind of feels like maybe she's between two worlds, and there's no real spot for her. And she's also really shy and awkward. And I think she had so many funny things to say, but never had the confidence to say them out loud. And so she's kind of just funny in her own head, and she struggled with making friends. And so I think through her journey, she feels like she has to be someone else to be her authentic self. She has to, you know, take on a new persona, take on a new identity, and maybe people will like her. And so I think she learns towards the end that she was always enough, you know, and we're always enough just as we are. And I really want people to be comforted by the fact that sometimes it takes a journey, sometimes it takes a lot of pain and getting yourself in trouble to kind of realize that you are always, you know, precious and unique and, you know, perfectly yourself. And that's kind of what I want.
That's an excellent message. Thank you. And Jaya.
So I'd say the themes in my book are my message. The main two messages to kids reading my book would be you're capable of more than you can possibly imagine. And then sort of a segue from that is you're not your mistakes. So when I was teaching middle school, I found even just like with my own children, like my oldest is she'll be turning 10 soon. And I just find that they carry their mistakes sometimes very squarely on their shoulders. And even if they're not talking about it to people, inside it can be gnawing away at them. And so in this book, Kiana, my main character, hates math. She just is not a fan. And so anytime she gets a math test or anything math related, and her best friend, of course, is a math whiz and math club president. And, you know, she feels very, very nauseous, and she gets very, very anxious. And so she has this aversion to it, and she tends to lean into the things that come easier to her. Baking is something that comes very, very easy to her. She has a really sort of intuitive knack for ingredients and composing things with ingredients. And so she tends to lean in that. And I'm hoping that resonates with kids who tend to lean into things that they enjoy more and assume they can't do certain other things because they don't come as easy. And so in the book, even when she approaches magic for the first time and it doesn't come as natural to her, she fears that it'll be like math. And so you see this push-pull struggle of the things happening in her life and her understanding that she's not defined by her mistakes, and that some things take a little bit more effort for her, but that doesn't mean that she can't do them if she really wants to. So
thank you. That's another great message. So my last question, and just take a second to think about it, but I want you to describe your resourceful character in one word. So one word that you think best describes your resourceful middle grade character. So Can we start with Loriel? And then we'll go around.
Sure. I guess the word I would choose is determined.
Determined. Excellent. Jessica?
Funny.
Funny. JL?
Ah, I'm gonna go with determined as well. Is that cheating? I think it's the most accurate. So
That's okay. We can have as many determined characters as possible. Clarabelle?
I would say brave.
Brave. And Reyna?
Kind.
Awesome. Well, just based on those adjectives alone, I'm excited to read your books, and that actually brings us to the end of our panel today. So again, I want to thank all of our authors for coming here today to discuss their books, and thank you to the Middle Ground Book Fest for having us all. So everyone say your goodbyes, and we'll be off.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
bye.